Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk through 5 surprisingly productive things that you can do with your spare time. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned entrepreneur, and I'm the author of the New York Times bestseller, Feel Good Productivity, which is about how to do more of what matters to you. Now, when we think of being more productive, it's very easy for us to think that that's just work related. But the way that I would personally define productivity is that productivity is about using our time in a way that's intentional, effective, and enjoyable. So if, like me, you often find yourself with some spare time here and there in between things, you want to be productive in that time, but you don't necessarily want to do work, then here are 5 ideas for experiments that you can try out in your life. I find these 5 things to be needle moving for my own energy levels. They help me feel more refreshed and recharged, and these are generally productive things that I find really helpful to do when I've got spare time. Okay, so the first thing on the list is a little bit rogue, but this is something that I often get people to do when I do talks and events, and it takes just a few minutes, but people have cried as a result of doing this. People have said that it's changed their life in various ways. Maybe it's a little bit hyperbolic, but basically, try this right now. This is going to be a bit interactive. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine someone that you feel a sense of gratitude towards. If you could say something to them, what is the thing that you would say to that person as an expression of your gratitude towards them or towards how they've helped you in your life? Then what I ask people to do at these events is I say, okay, everyone, now get out your phone and open up WhatsApp or iMessage or whatever and put in that person's thing and just type out the message to that person. Type out what you would say to them. And you don't have to send it, but it's just, it's just nice to type it out. And then once they've all done that, I say, okay, everyone, once you've done that, could you please sit down? Because I get people to stand up while doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, and now feel free to send the message. I'm not saying you have to, I can't tell you what to do, but feel free to send that message of gratitude. And about 80% of people in the room will send that message. And I will look around and people will come up to me afterwards and they'll be like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. Sometimes the friend will reply there and then being like, OMG, this message brought me to tears, thank you so much, blah, 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 blah. Not once has anyone ever received a negative response as a result of this message of gratitude, a message of thanks. And it's something that is so easy to do. It takes 2-3 minutes out of your time when you're bored, when you instead of scrolling, to just go through your contacts and send a nice thank you message to someone. I like doing thank you notes as well. I have like a little thank you note stationery thing, which is currently downstairs with some stamps, where I had a birthday party the other day. I recently turned 30, and so people gave me a bunch of gifts and people came to the party. So one of these days, hopefully, I'm just gonna go around and just write small little handwritten thank you notes. But it doesn't have to be as high friction as mailing snail mail to someone. It can just be sending someone a thank you message, and that is one of the most productive things you can do with your time. All right, productive thing number 2 that you can do with your spare time is something that I actually do with students of Productivity Lab, which is my community for people who want to double their productivity. And we do this every single week. And the people who attend this event and do this thing, it takes 20 minutes to do, but people have said, oh my God, this has been the most productive thing I've done all week. This has been the most productive thing I've done all year. We get a lot of very hyperbolic comments about this specific thing. And this thing is a weekly reflection, where you spend 20 minutes reflecting on how your last week has gone and making a little bit of a plan for the following week. So there are a handful of questions that I do in my personal weekly reflection. These are the questions we take students through in Productivity Lab. If you're interested in Productivity Lab, you can find a link down below. But the questions are as follows. Number 1, align. So the first one is, what are our annual goals and how are they going? And the second one is, what are our quarterly quests and how are they going? So annual goals are like, what are my goals for the year? And quarterly quests are basically, what are my goals for the quarter? But I call them quarterly quests because the whole philosophy of Feel Good Productivity, which is my book about how to be more productive in a way that feels good, in case you haven't read it. The whole idea is that if you can find a way to make your work feel good, then productivity takes care of itself. So instead of calling them quarterly goals or quarterly objectives, I call them quarterly quests, because it just makes it a little bit more fun. But what are our annual goals and what are our quarterly quests and how are they going? Secondly, we are reflecting. What were the good and great things that happened last week? Now this is really nice. This is where I just spent 3 minutes going through my calendar from the week before, racking my memory and thinking, what were the wins? What can I celebrate? Especially, if you watch this channel, you're probably kind of like me. You're probably an overachiever. You're probably very good looking as well. And it's easy for us to just keep on marching on and on and on, especially if you're interested in productivity like I am. And it's easy for us to keep marching on and forget to celebrate the wins, which is why asking this question every week, what were the good and great things that happened last week? It's a really nice way of reminding ourselves about how far we've come. The next question is, what were last week's challenges? In what ways did we not act in line with our intentions for the week? And what would we like to change, if anything, next week? This is a bit of a mishmash of one question, but it's essentially getting at challenges and then action points. Next, we have organize. Look ahead to the next 2 weeks. Does anything need scheduling in the calendar, or any tasks need adding to our to-do list? And this is where I look ahead and I see, okay, cool, I don't have a gym session there, or let me actually do a date night over there, or maybe next Wednesday let me go visit my mum and have dinner with her, and just looking forward 2 weeks and just doing a little bit of a plan for your work, but also for your life, maybe even more importantly, is a super productive thing you can do. And then the final question is, what are our top 3 outcomes for the upcoming week? If the week ahead was going to be a great week, what would be the top 3 things we'd accomplish? Let's make sure those are in the calendar. And again, this is just useful to align to what are the most important things you want to be working on the following week, and then just making sure they're in the calendar, because if it's not in the calendar, it's unlikely to get done. This weekly reflection is just an absolutely game-changing thing to do every week. If you forget, sometimes I forget to do it, which is why we've created a productivity lab where we do it with people together in a facilitated session, but you can do it on your own. It takes about 20 minutes. You can put some nice background music on. And I guarantee if you do a weekly reflection, you will not regret that use of 20 minutes of your time. And it's way more productive for your work, but also for your life and your health and your general well-being, and also for your relationships. If instead of spending 20 minutes scrolling Instagram, you instead spend 20 minutes on a weekend or on a Friday reflecting on your week and making a plan for the following week. Now, one very productive thing that you can do with your spare time is in fact meditation, and that brings us on to Headspace, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Headspace is an absolutely amazing meditation app that can help you build a daily meditation practice. Whether you need support as you navigate life events or handle daily life, or just become the best version of yourself, Headspace can help you out. And I've personally been working my way through the introductory course in meditation, which has been a really great introduction to the value and the point of meditation. So I personally like to do just a 5-minute meditation first thing in the morning before I do my journaling and before I get my coffee. But I've also now collaborated with Headspace, and there is now a feel-good productivity collection on Headspace, which can help you on the path to building healthy habits to boost your productivity and efficiency. In particular, I think you'll really enjoy the stuff around the value of play. Play as it relates to productivity, like finding ways to enjoy the work that we're doing. In that Headspace content collection, we've got a lot of good stuff around specifically how you can apply play to your work and to your life to help you be more productive, but in a way that's actually fulfilling and enjoyable. And so if you want to see how Headspace might be helpful for you, and you want to check out the Feel Good Productivity Collection, you can try it out completely for free for 60 days. All you have to do is sign up with the link in the video description, or scan the QR code that should hopefully be on screen right now. So thank you so much to Headspace for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. All right, let's move on to point number 3 now. And there is a friend who is in his 40s. He's like 40 something, he's married, he's got kids, he's an entrepreneur, super successful guy. And I was chatting to him the other day, and I was asking him for some life advice because I've just turned 30, and so I'm going around asking all of my friends who are older than me and who seem to be happily married with thriving businesses and stuff for life advice. And I asked him, what's one piece of advice he would give me, like what becomes harder to do as you get into your 30s? And one thing he said was, the older you get, the harder it is to maintain strong relationships with your friends in particular, because everyone's life gets busy, people get married, people have kids, you maybe move to different countries, it's hard to see people. And this guy seemed to have a really strong network, I guess, of friends and also family and also like work colleagues and stuff. And he said that there's one habit that he's been doing for over a decade that's been incredibly helpful, and that is using a personal CRM. If you're unfamiliar, a CRM is usually a work-related piece of software. It's a customer relationship management piece of software. Basically, if you have a business and let's say you're a salesperson, you would use a CRM to keep track of all of the potential prospects that are coming into your business. And then you have a sales call with them and you try and sell them your thing. And then you update the CRM with like the details of the customer and where they work and what they want from it. Professionals will use CRMs to keep track of their professional contacts so that they can then know more about them. It's almost like when I was working as a doctor, we would have these electronic patient record systems. So you see a patient, they're in bed number 3, you can double click on them and you can see a record of all of their previous hospital visits. So you get at a glance a summary of what the deal with this patient is, what conditions they have, what medications they're on, what they're allergic to, which means you sort of prep by seeing these details about the patient before you then talk to the patient. Now, this idea of CRMs and electronic patient records can also be applied to our personal lives. And this sounds a bit rogue, but bear with me because this is actually game-changing. So, for example, let's say keeping track of people's birthdays. You probably don't remember the birthdays of all the people that you would like to remember. I certainly don't remember the birthdays of all the people I'd like to remember. I remember my mum, my grandma, my brother's birthday, and maybe a couple of friends, but beyond that, I don't really know what anyone's birthday is. Partly this is thanks to Facebook. Back in the day when people actually used to use Facebook, you would see people's birthdays coming up. But since the beginning of time, people have been writing down in a little diary the birthdays of people who are close to them. A personal CRM is basically like that, and on a very basic level, it's kind of software or like a system that you can use to keep track of the people you want to stay in touch with, and you can write down their birthdays. That's one use of a personal CRM. But the other use of a personal CRM is that you can use it to take notes on your friends. So the very basic version of this is that back in 2021, I created an Apple Notes folder called People. And this was during the pandemic. And whenever I would have a call with a friend or a catch up with a friend, socially distanced of course, I would create a note for them in my Apple Notes folder. And the title of that note would be their name. For example, I've got one here, Danny Lowney, who is a friend of mine who runs a company called 16th. And then I would put today's date and I would just write a few notes about what we talked about. This was incredibly helpful because I see Danny maybe once every 6 to 9 months. And so I often forget like what was his life update back in the day. And so I'll just look through my notes thing and I'll be like, oh yeah, last time we spoke was 9 months ago or 6 months ago. He was just about to go to LA at the time. He was just starting this new company and was looking for investment on that thing. So I invested in that company and he was struggling with things X, Y, and Z. And at the time I talked to him about my struggle with identity and blah, 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 blah. And this is what we talked about. This is super, super helpful. This means the next time I talk to Danny, I can say, hey, so last time we spoke, I remember you were talking about that move to LA. How did that go? And Danny then feels like I'm a very thoughtful friend because I remembered the fact he was moving to LA and the whole business and stuff. And maybe I remembered some of it, but the fact that I had the details in my personal CRM in a very simple note entitled Danny means that I can sort of systemize being thoughtful, if that makes sense. Now, people find this shit weird. People are like, oh, but you should just remember. It's like, should you? Should you just remember all your friends' birthdays? If you're keeping track of multiple people in your network, people that you don't necessarily see very often, do you expect to, do you know the names of all of your coworkers' kids? Probably not. I have all of my team members' kids' names written down so that next time I see Dan, I can be like, how's Alex doing? That kind of thing, rather than thinking, oh shit, what are Dan's kids' names again? That sort of general idea. And so the productive thing you can do if you're bored is create or update a personal CRM. It can be a super simple thing. It can be a notes folder that just has names for people you want to stay in touch with and just writes a few details about them. Or you can do something that I've been starting doing recently on the advice of this friend. There's an app called Dex, getdex.com. There'll be an affiliate link down below. It's not sponsored, but we did reach out to them and they were like, oh, sick. Like here's a discount code. So there's a discount code down below if you want to check it out. But Dex is basically software that lets you import your phone contacts, the ones that you want. And you can set a frequency of how often you want to stay in touch with them. And you can also add notes. And it will give you reminders like, oh, you intended to stay in touch with this person every 3 months. It's been 3 months since the last time you contacted them. Would you like to reach out? And it's just a very, very helpful way of keeping in touch with relationships, especially as you age, especially as we become busier, especially as that becomes harder. And it's a way of kind of having a system to help you be more thoughtful, because we all want to be more thoughtful. We all want to maintain these relationships and these connections, but it can be really hard in the midst of all the things that we're doing. So a very productive thing you can do is take a few minutes every now and then to update your personal CRM. All right, let's move on now to tip number 4. Now, one of the things that I am most glad I've done in my life is that back in 2019, my brother and I decided to start a podcast together. You probably haven't heard of it because it's very small, it's very niche. We don't really publicize it, we don't monetize it. It's just a thing that we started doing for fun. And for the last 5 years, and we've been a bit inconsistent with it for the last 2, but for the first 3 years of it, definitely, every single week, my brother and I were just sitting down, either in person or over Zoom, and we were just recording a podcast together. And there was no agenda here. The point wasn't to monetize, the point wasn't to get views. It was just because we wanted to have a bit of a chat. And so it's a bit rogue, but one surprisingly productive thing that I'd recommend you at least consider as an experiment is what would it look like to record a podcast with a friend or family member? It doesn't even have to be a whole podcast series. It can just be a single episode of a podcast. It doesn't have to be high friction. It can be very low friction. You can just turn on the voice memos thing on your phone. You can sit across from your friend and you can just have a conversation. Or if you really want to, you can set up your phone, like prop it up, landscape or something to record both of you while you're having that conversation. If you have camera gear and stuff, sure, you can do it. If it's remote, you can do it on Riverside. Riverside is a great platform. I happen to be an investor in the platform. It's fantastic. That's how we record all of our podcasts remotely. But you can just record a podcast with a friend. Now, this is something that I actually do. Like yesterday, for example, I was about to do a podcast with Cal Newport, but he was running a few minutes late, like half an hour late because he had a talk. So I had this half an hour window of time where Kaylin, one of my new team members, was in the house. And instead of just sort of sitting around, I said to Kaylin, hey, Kaylin, should we just record a podcast? Just like a casual chat between the two of us. And she was like, sure. And we had the cameras and the microphones and stuff set up. And so Kaylin and I just had a chat over the podcast. And the weird thing is, the nice thing about podcast formats is, I suspect if you're watching this, you haven't tried doing a podcast or being on a podcast, but it really encourages people to open up. Not necessarily their deepest, darkest secrets, but when someone is being interviewed on a podcast, It's like it becomes so much easier to expand on your thoughts, and you kind of ask questions to people that you know that you may not have ever asked them before. When I talk to my brother, and on our podcast, we go almost way deeper on non-personal topics than we would when we're just chatting by ourselves. When I'm interviewing one of my friends or one of my team members, even if we're never going to publish it, even if it's just a thing that stays in my Apple photos, or that stays as an unlisted video on YouTube just because it's easy to access then, even then, it deepens the connection between us to just sit across from each other and just record a podcast. So I think one thing that you can really try is very productive. It does require another person to be there, is to simply record a podcast with a friend. If you don't have any friends to record podcasts with and you would like to do this technique solo, another thing you can try is doing a video diary of yourself. You can literally just open up the phone recording app on your phone, the video recording app on your phone, put it on selfie mode, prop it up somewhere, I don't know, in front of you, and just say, hey, this is going to be a bit of a video diary and I'm going to talk about blah, 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 blah. Like, there's something about recording a video diary and recording a podcast. There's something about being recorded that, initially, once you get past the, feels weird, because, this is never going to be published. It's purely private. There's something about talking to yourself or talking to someone else in a recording that is going to be there for a while, that functions as a memory, that really helps get out things that you might not have thought about otherwise. Often when I'm being interviewed on a podcast, I come out with really good wisdom, where I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, I couldn't have come up with that if I was just sort of sitting on my computer typing. There's something about recording yourself that's really nice in terms of memories, and also really nice in terms of deepening connection with yourself and with your friends. All right, now we move on to experiment number 5. And, when I was doing research for my book, Feel Good Productivity, which you can check out if you haven't already, shameless plug. When I was doing research for the book, there was a lot of stuff that came up about the importance of environment in shaping how we think, how we feel, how we act, and how productive and intentional and stuff we are. The power of the environment around us. Essentially, when the space around me is a total mess, like it sort of is now, but we're in the filming day with a podcast editor. Like, when the space around me is a bit of a mess, it adds a level of to sitting down and doing something productive. It adds a level of I don't like sitting down to work, I don't like sitting down to read, I don't like sitting down to call my grandma, or even to play video games, which can be very productive if you're doing it intentionally. I don't like doing those things when the space around me feels a bit meh. And so what I've realized over the years is one of the most productive things that I can do with a few minutes of spare time is, instead of trying to start a new work task or scrolling social media or whatever, is literally just take 3 to 10 minutes to just tidy my space. Like, take the mugs that are gathering on the desk downstairs, take the tissues that have sort of fallen out of the bin and put them in the bin, empty out the trash, take the wires that the phone charger that's over there and the laptop charger that's over there, and just sort of tidy them up. Take stuff that's on top of countertops, like this thing and this thing and this freaking cable management thing and this little thing for SD cards, and just put it somewhere out of sight. And just doing that for a few minutes every now and then, maybe even every few days, really helps our spaces become more organized, become less cluttered. And if you have a less cluttered space, you have a less cluttered and chaotic mind. And it just makes every action that you take in that space just feel a little bit more calm. Now, the final productive thing you can do with your time that we're going to talk about in this video is journaling. And this video has gotten long enough, so I'm going to leave you with that video over there, which is 10 powerful journaling prompts that have most changed my life. If you do any one of these, even just for a few minutes, just with a pen and paper journal, or even with an Apple Note file or whatever, I guarantee it's going to help you discover new insights and realizations about yourself, and can genuinely be one of the most productive things you ever do. So check out my journaling prompts video over there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.